like that. And I thought I was going to die. She said, but then all of a sudden I could hear the words of your prayer. And you could hear them, and she said, crystal clear.
This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide. And we see God, we see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. Glad you're here for episode 84 of Touched by Heaven. How's your trust? How is your trust? In God, of course. Yeah, it's great, right? All the time. Okay, Mother Angelica, who this cloistered nun who started up EWTN, the Eternal Word Television Network, she described trust, or faith, they're kind of interchangeable. Faith is 1 foot on the ground, 1 foot in the air, and a queasy feeling in your stomach. And she further explained that. She said, you have to do the ridiculous in order for God to do the miraculous. You have to do the ridiculous in order for God to do the miraculous. That doesn't mean you do something ridiculous to show God, see, I have faith. No. Because she further explains that. When you have God within you, when you have the Spirit, when you have God, you don't have to know everything. You just have to do it. Meaning that when you feel that push, that pull, that, I know this is coming from God feeling, you don't have to know everything. You just have to do it. And it can look ridiculous. It can look stupid. But you have to do that ridiculous in order for God to do the miraculous. There's a chain of events in all of that, right? So, and a perfect example is that $600,000 satellite dish that she ordered so she could pump the programming to the world. She didn't have $600,000, but she didn't have to know everything. She just had to know that God wanted her to order the satellite dish for $600,000, which she doesn't have. But she did the ridiculous. She made the call so God could do the miraculous. So the guy pulls up, the truck driver pulls up and he's got a flatbed and he's got a $600,000 satellite dish waiting. And he said, okay, sister, just give me the check and I'll get this off the truck. Okay, just a minute, I'll be right back. And she doesn't have the money. She goes into the chapel, sits in the pew, looks up to Jesus and says, you have a money problem. Where's the money? You told me to do this. Here I am. Where is it? She sat there for a while. She prayed and nothing. Okay. And she had to feel so foolish, so ridiculous. So she heads on back out to tell the truck driver to drive on. She's walking through the office and sister, somebody's on the phone for you from his yacht in the Caribbean. Hi, sister. I'm reading your book. I love your book. You're something. Can I help you in any way? And a little bit later, the truck driver was taking the satellite dish off the flatbed truck. Isn't that amazing? It's crazy. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know enough to know that God is within you and that God is pushing you to do something. And then you just go with it, even if it feels so ridiculous, so stupid. But then God can do what He can do. Okay. I had an infinitesimal amount of that today. I don't make any claims. There was no money involved. There was no stupidity involved. Nobody would know other than you wouldn't be getting a podcast, because this podcast, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, depends on when you listen, but we're late in getting this podcast up. Why? Because the song, you're so tired of me saying this. The song has been playing over and over again in my head. It won't go away. It's been playing for days. Paula Cole, I Don't Want to Wait. You know that here. I'll play just a touch of it here. You know this song. Here we go. That one. Anyway, it's called I Don't Want to Wait. I don't want to wait until our lives are over. I want to know right now. There's no kind of an opposite of Mother Angelica. I want to know now. In other words, I want to know everything. I want to know everything now that this turns out okay. Otherwise, I don't want to wait forever and then find out at the end that I'm going to be disappointed. I want to know now. So it's just the opposite, right? So that's the part of the song. So do I have an interview that is touched? No, I don't have an interview. I have a song. I don't have an interview. So apparently I'm waiting for an interview. Later in the song, it talks about how I know this is the only moment. This moment right here is the only moment. I have to stay in this moment. Sometimes we can live in the future, live in the past. I have to live in this moment because the only place I can do anything is here and now. Right here, right now, I can pray for somebody. I can put my faith into action right now. So once again, we're spiritualizing lyrics here. And by the way, It's always gender specific. That's a woman singing. So there's something in there about a woman. Doesn't want to wait. That's part of it. And something about being in the moment, spiritualizing the lyrics. What it's something to do with God in the moment, right here, right now. That's all I know. And I know I don't have an interview in which that comes. I don't have it. So I've just been waiting. So yesterday I'm waiting. I checked my phone. There's an email on my phone. Oh, looky there. Notification. I got an email. Brian sent me a story. Oh, start reading the story. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. He has his phone number on there. I'll text him. Hey, Brian, it's Trapper. Can you talk right now?
Hello?
Aren't we just quick?
No kidding. Well, how are you doing, Trapper Jack?
I'm doing great. How'd you find us?
Through Jim Harold.
Oh, way back when, Paranormal Podcast. I'm going to be back on his, actually. I'm going to be back on his very soon, yeah. And Jim and I have talked about this and how God is the original paranormal. He created the subject matter, I think.
Yes, sir.
Where are you living?
So I live in Joplin, Missouri.
Brian grew up, I think it was Texas, he said, before moving to Missouri. Baptist, Methodist, got in a little trouble later in his teen years when he joined the band. Trouble in the sense that, what bands often do with the drinking and drugging and all that kind of good stuff. But he got away from it. In college, he double majored, biblical literature and psychology. He thought he might be a counselor. But he had an entrepreneurial spirit, and that's what he has brought to fruition.
Ended up becoming basically an entrepreneur and started several small businesses. And right now, my wife and I have our own business. I'm a professional gardener, and she's an artist. And so you caught me right before I got out to do some work on one of our properties. We manage the properties of wealthy families and make them look really nice.
Someone's got to do that work. They're not doing it.
Yes, right.
Brian also likes to give of himself at a homeless center. And at this particular homeless center, it's kind of a cool deal. People trade. In other words, they work, and for that, you need clothing. Great. There's clothing. Food, need that. So there's work involved, and then they get something back. And Brian himself has a recycling center, so he brings a lot of these homeless folks into his workplace so they can work, so they can get, whether it's clothing, food, whatever it is they happen to need. This past summer, 2019, something pretty dramatic happened, and it involves a woman named Mandy.
A lot of them are dealing with drug-related issues. So Joplin, Missouri is unfortunately one of the crystal meth capitals of the country. And so a lot of the people there are on it or have been on it, and that just destroyed their lives. And
yeah, you mentioned in your email, too, that meth, this is true with alcohol, it's true with a lot of drugs, but maybe even more so meth. It does connect you to the spiritual level, just not a good one.
Correct. Yes, sir. I have a lot of homeless friends now, and many of them have told me how they'll literally see demons when they're coming down, and it makes them say and do things they'll tell me that they would never have done otherwise. So it just brings about a complete negative transformation of character.
Okay, so what happened this one particular day?
I hear just this weird thud, and I turn around, and I see this lady just thrashing around on the floor. And I've seen her many times before, but I had never really talked to her. I didn't know her name. She was not, some of them are pleasant and some are not, and she was not a pleasant person. And so we had never really spent any time together at all.
How old would you say she was?
Mid-40s. Looks older, but mid to late 40s.
Right.
So, and I knew a lot of the times when I would see her that she was on drugs, and my guess was meth, which her boyfriend later confirmed that theory. And so she's thrashing around, and there's a room full of people there. And staff start coming in, and her boyfriend is there comforting her and trying to keep her from hurting herself, and holding her, just talking to her come back to me, baby, come back to me, baby. And she kicks that table, and she had actually broken the metal leg in half.
With her leg?
With her leg, correct. That's how hard the kick was. And so I'm standing there on the other side of another table where she couldn't see me if she had her eyes open because the table's blocking it, but I can still see her thrashing. I start praying, and I've studied some about spiritual warfare and exorcism and possession and such, and I know that God knows our thoughts, and since I knew she was on drugs, I figured I better pray so that if it was a demonic thing or spiritual thing, that they could hear it. And so I'm just standing there, and I start praying for her and for God's intervention and His power over the spiritual world. And but I'm not. There's people on either side of me, but I'm not praying loud enough to where no one around me knows that I'm praying.
Okay, so it's kind of it's a slight whisper to yourself, really, more than anything else.
Exactly. Yes, sir. She's been seizing for a while, and then just out of nowhere, instantly comes out of it, and she arches her back just tremendously and somehow lifts her head to where she can see above the table that's blocking her view of me. And she locks eyes with me, and sorry, I get a little emotional, but then she reaches out, and I've never seen such desperation in anyone's eyes in my life. So it was like she was being dragged to hell, and for some reason was reaching out to me to save her. And she just locks in that position for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, and then just collapses right back into the seizure. And so I keep praying, and gradually it subsides. And at this point, someone has a cool towel on her head, and her boyfriend's still by her side. And after a minute or so, after she stopped seizing, her eyes gradually open. And I figured she'd hug her boyfriend or something like that, but she didn't acknowledge anyone in the room. She just immediately started scanning everywhere, and I didn't know what she was doing. But again, she found me and then just reached out her hands to me and grabbed them and said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And I didn't know what for, but I just held her hands. And we get her into a chair. She's super rigid, so we basically lift her into a chair, and she apologizes to everyone in the room because it had been quite a commotion. And she just looks straight up and starts saying, "God, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And then she just starts rattling off all these sins that she's committed, just sin after sin. Just, "Please forgive me, God. Please forgive me, God." And that went on for maybe a minute or two, and she's just bawling the whole time. And finally she stops that and then relaxes. And she is kind of her normal self again, and we want to get her someplace out of the commotion where there's not like 15 or 20 people around. So she still can't walk because she's so rigid. And so her boyfriend and I basically put one arm over each of our shoulders and carry her to a quiet place and sit her down. And I patted her shoulder and walked out and left her. And then like the next hour, I was just deeply affected. was more than emotional. It was like I knew. Well, it wasn't like I knew. I knew something had happened in the spiritual realm but I had no clue what it was. I just my spirit was stirred. I don't even know exactly how to define it. But for the next hour or so, I basically just was by myself and just did things but didn't talk to anyone. It was kind of processing it or something like that. The conclusion I came to at that point was that I knew something had happened, but our odds were I would never find out what it was. And I came back the next week, and I didn't know her name. We didn't know each other, but I've been in the room where the recycling takes place, and I walk out into the hall, and I see her, and she just smiles, gets this big smile on her face, and comes over and gives me a hug. She just looks completely different. Hey, how are you doing? She said, oh, I'm doing great. She said, I haven't been this good in a long time. She said, I've actually been keeping my system clean since then. And she said, my boyfriend hasn't even been drinking. I told her that was great. And we talked for just a little while, and I started to go our separate ways in the hall. And I just had to see if she could give me any insight as to what had happened. I said, do you mind if I ask you a question? She said, no, not at all. I said, why was it that when you came to last week, you found me and told me thank you? She got all serious all of a sudden, and she said, nothing like that ever happened to me before in my life. She said, I've never had a seizure like that, and I thought I was going to die. She said, but then all of a sudden I could hear the words of your prayer. I said, you could hear them? And she said, crystal clear. And she said, I grabbed onto those and I started praying with you. And those prayers are what brought me out. And she said, you saved my life. I gave her a big hug, and that was basically the end of it. But my son, fortunately, was there whenever she told me that. And I was just completely taken aback because I knew something had happened, but I would have never guessed that in a million years because I couldn't even hear my prayers. You know, they're that soft. And yet, thrashing around in the seizure, she could hear every word. So,
wow.
And it was quite an experience and a great reminder that we don't need to expect the possible from God because He can do far more.
And on that spiritual realm, which is where she was, she could hear every syllable.
I know. It just blew my mind.
Did she think she was not just going to die, but headed to hell? What was she grabbing onto?
You know, Trevor Jack, I don't know. I just know that she thought she was dying.
How do you feel? Someone just walked up to you and said, "You saved my life." Your prayers I could hear clear as a bell. I could hear your and I latched onto them and you pulled me back. What does that do for you?
First, I was in shock. But second, I felt so grateful that God had, prayed for many, 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 many people. And so I was just doing what I would normally do. But this time, God took a normal action and He did something no one would have ever anticipated. And so I felt honored that He had used me to help someone and that He would take something as normal as a prayer, my prayer, and do something that is just physically not possible in someone's life.
It's the kind of story I would love non-believers to hear. You know, what is it? I still remember, and I won't say who it was. It was a famous comedian. He's not with us anymore, but an atheist. And he said, they've done studies, and you can pray to the Empire State Building. It'll get you the same result. And as much as I talked to this individual about what I saw in the power of prayer, he didn't want to hear it. And anyone hearing this, I'm just glad they're hearing this, because the power of our prayer is beyond the scope of our imagination, isn't it?
Absolutely is. And that was the most concrete example I'd ever witnessed. And I've read tons of stories of miracles, and I listen to your podcast and read a lot. And that one, it stands. It's not more dramatic than many things, but it's just unique. Just a completely unique thing in my knowledge that he did that time with that prayer. And again, just shows that we don't need to just expect what we think is the best outcome, because he can do things that we never dreamed were possible through prayer.
He put you there. You know that. He put you there.
Yes, sir.
He put you there, and he put you there for her to have that experience so that she, I pray, is still clean. And he put you there so you could experience that and take that with you for the rest of your life. Your son got to watch it, and you get to explain that to him. Those around you get to hear that story. Look, and right now, too.
Yes, sir.
It's such a great reminder. I love this. It's just such a great reminder that when we say, hi, God, he's saying hi. Hi right back. Love you, yes, God. Sir. Love you, too. Loving anybody. Praying for somebody. Interceding for somebody. That's why, as you've heard us talk many times about the intercessory prayer, whether I ask you to pray for somebody or me, or if I ask a saint, or we're all connected. We're all praying for each other. And those prayers have such huge value, no matter how silently we're saying them, how in the mind we're saying them. We're driving down the road and an ambulance goes by and you go, help them, God. Just that. And it does, and it does, and it lands. Every single prayer lands.
And I think another impact that had on me, I prayed a decent amount before, but now it's just, when I drive the kids to school almost every morning, and every morning we say a prayer on the way in. We say prayers with the kids every night. My brother's going through rough times, and almost every night I pray for him over the phone. Just they make a difference, and in ways that we won't know till we're on the other side. And so I know it works. God listens.
Always listening. Always listening. And these beautiful touched by heaven moments,
Yes, sir.
What is it about the podcast you like?
I love multiple things, but I love seeing God's activity in the lives of normal people. And oftentimes when we don't expect it, or many times people just don't think he cares that much. And every one of those stories that you bring to your podcast are just such powerful examples of how deeply and intimately he cares for every one of us, even if we don't care for him. I'm actually currently reading the story of my descent into death, because I heard him on your podcast, the atheist professor.
Yeah.
He didn't want anything to do with God, but God wanted everything to do with him. And that's how he is with everybody.
Howard Storm is an amazing story. This guy hated God, hated everything about him, didn't believe he existed. He, his wife, and then he gets hit with this near-death experiences demons, and somehow in the echoes of his mind, if you will, he heard a voice. Talk about a silent, almost silent voice of just pray to God. And so he strived to do so, even though he wasn't there anymore. And pinpoint of light. And that pinpoint of light just zipped to him right away, covered him, and it was Jesus picking him up.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing story. The guy, not to blow, I'm trying to remember which episode. I'm thinking it's 9, might not be. Don't hold me to it, but
6, I want to say.
It could be. Okay, 6.
I think so.
And he becomes a pastor.
Oh, no. And loses his wife, all of his friends, everybody turns their back on him. They think he's a nut.
Yeah. They were talking about making a movie. I don't know if they still are or not, but it's an incredible story. I mean, all these stories, your story, and you're right. Your story is unique. This is a very unique story of touching somebody when they're just about gone. When there isn't much physical there, it's all spiritual. Their physical's almost gone, and you were connecting that spirit to spirit, and it brought her back. Great story.
Thanks. I just kept feeling like I needed to share it with more than just family and friends, and God can do amazing things. He can. I have to ask you this, because there's a song that's, you're going to be on this week's podcast. It may be up. It's either going to be, I have a talk coming up this evening, so it might be tomorrow. I don't know when this will be up, but I want to make you part of this week's episode. I feel like I've been waiting for you, to be honest with you. I've had a song playing in my head. I've been waiting. I've been actually waiting today for another story, and so when I got your email, it's like, okay, maybe you're the other half of this week's podcast. But the song that's been playing over and over again is a song by Paula Cole, and it's called "I Don't Want to Wait." I don't want to wait till this life is over. I want to know right now. She mentions in the song, she says in the song, I know that the only moment is right now. I know this is the only moment is right now. We can live in the future, we can live in the past, but the only moment is right now. And in that moment that you were praying, that's that moment. When we pray to God, we can't pray in the future. God is outside time, we're not. So when we pray, it's right now. Right now.
Dealing with whatever we're dealing with. And you and the gal there, Mandy, were connected in that right now moment. Does the title mean anything? Does the song mean anything to you? Do you have any connection to that song?
I'm not familiar with it, if that's what you're asking. Okay.
Well, this has been awesome, Brian. I'm so glad you contacted me today. Now I have a podcast. I was just waiting for you.
Well, thank you. I honestly didn't know I've never contacted anything like a podcast or anything like that, so I didn't know if I'd hear back or what. So it took me aback when I pulled up and looked at my text, and it said, "This is Trapper Jack." Well, hey,
what do you know about that? Hey, what do you know about that?
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. And now I can see when I look at the lyrics here, it's all the way back at the beginning. It's only sung once. Just the opening few verses have so much to do with, once again, gender specific. Mandy connecting with Brian in prayer, right? The beginning of the song. Let's see. What is this right about here? So open up your morning light and say a little prayer for I. Open up your morning light. Light always having to do with God, right? The light of God, the light of Christ. And say a little prayer for I. For if we are to stay alive, to see the peace in every eye, and she connected with that peace in the eye, in the voice, in the mind of Brian. He was connecting with her on that spiritual level where she could hear words. There's no way she should have been able to hear those words. She heard his prayer, connected to that prayer. She needed that prayer to pull her out of that horrible place where she felt she very well could have lost her life. I'm not going to say nobody else was praying for Mandy. Others were gathering, but sometimes we get in the watch mode. Don't we do that when we watch television news? We're just watching, we're just gawkers. We're just rubberneckers. And in those moments, we should be praying, shouldn't we? Shouldn't we be sending, as we just found out, those prayers have value. Our heart, our mind has value, and to pray in that moment. As the song says, there's only one moment. It's right now. This is it. This is the moment. The only place I can do anything for anybody is now. So that's in the song. So anyway, this song was all connected. And then look what happened also on that spiritual level. When she was in that beautiful spot with God, with Brian, she went to repentance. She saw her sins. She repented for her sins, cleansed her completely, to the point that when he saw her the next time, it was a different person. This was a different person. She had gone through some great transformation. Which also leads me to a different song that I woke up to this morning. I mean, it was like, what? Now what? It's a Johnny Cash song in which he, in the spiritualization of the song, he's the devil. He's the devil. And the song is called For Loving Me. That's what you get for loving me. Taking everything from us.
Everything you have is gone that you can see.
That's what you get for loving me. And it has to do with, as we spiritualize the lyrics, how the vices can get us, the drugs, the alcohol, the booze, the sex, the porn. And we can slide down that slippery slope. That's what you get for loving me. There's 100 more like you. There'll be 1,000 before I'm through. And just a reminder, just seek help if you can. Get away from it. Look at the transformation that happened with Mandy there is available for everybody, you know. But I thought it was interesting to wake up to that as just a reminder. There is a devil. There is a source for evil. And it's a slippery slope, isn't it? That's what you get for loving me. Thank God for the Brians of the world. Thank God for those prayers. Thank God for your prayers that you're praying for those around you. Putting God first, loving everybody around us, forgiving everybody. We make it a rotten place for the devil. It's great. It's all good. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. Thank you. I appreciate it, Camille. Camille Anter, our shout out this week, helping us out through Patreon. Thanks, Camille. We appreciate your years of listening and supporting what we do here at Touched by Heaven. If you'd like to do the same, go to this episode 84 here at touchedbyheaven.net, or go straight to Patreon and look for Trapper Jack. And we appreciate your support and for sharing these stories. Oh, I need your story. You never know how long you're going to make me wait here. God's waiting for you. You know, we got to connect the songs and your stories and all that. So do that at touchedbyheaven.net. I need to hear your story, your encounter at touchedbyheaven.net. And I will see you next week here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.